And you've been listening to President Trump there, giving his first direct speech on why the U.S. Attacked Iran in the first place over a month ago. An 18-minute speech where he basically, first of all, declared victory, saying that epic fury has, resulted in swift, decisive, and overwhelming victories with Iran's Navy, Air Force leaders, all destroyed and killed. And then he outlined the case to Americans on why the operation was necessary, going back primarily to his campaign pledge that there will not be a nuclear-armed Iran, criticizing the deal that Barack Obama made as well, called the JCPOA, which he said would have led to Iran producing a nuclear weapon and threatening the United States. He went on to say that the core strategic goals for the U.S. are near complete as far as Iran is concerned. He also, made mention of allies, in particular with relation to the Strait of Hormuz, saying that others must now take care of it. They should take the lead. They should, meantime, buy U.S. oil and build up the courage to take it and protect it. I quote directly there. And he also did mention that negotiations are ongoing, but the end is near, basically saying also that the end of the military operation or Epic Fury is 2 to 3 weeks away. The U.S., meantime, will continue, President Trump says, to attack Iranian sites, at the same time mentioning that negotiations are ongoing with, leaders. He didn't say who they are. With new leaders in the regime. Well, Nick Harper has been watching all things very closely for us as well. He joins us live now from Washington, D.C. So tell us a bit more about what the president has said about Washington's plans for the war on Iran. Is there actual clarity now on what the aims are?
Well, not entirely, Arnold, and I have to admit that felt like a bit of a placeholder speech. There wasn't a great deal of new information. Much of what Donald Trump spoke about in those 18 minutes was really a repeat of what we've heard in recent days, parroting some of his own social media posts, returning to some of his previous gripes about past US presidents, but also outlining his perceived evils in Iran. And I think much of what was detailed there was really trying to portray this as a major win for the United States. As you mentioned, he went through those successes, listing his objectives and explaining how he believes those objectives were met, including by saying there had been swift, decisive and overwhelming victories on the battlefield, saying that the Iranian Navy was gone, that the Air Force was in ruins, that most of the leaders were now dead, and that missiles and nuclear weapons were essentially off the table, that the United States had helped to obliterate those and make sure that Iran never got a nuclear weapon. But I think there were some glaring omissions in all of that. And as well as not really detailing where things were heading with negotiations, he did not exactly explain how much longer this military campaign would last. Over the last few days, he's been a little bit more specific, talking about 2 to 3 weeks. During the course of that speech, he reiterated that 2 to 3 week timeline, but he said that in that 2 to 3 week timeline, the US would hit Iran extremely hard, and didn't quite say that at the end of that 3 weeks, that would be the end of the military campaign. He said that the United States was on track to end things shortly, very shortly, and he also said that the core strategic objectives are nearing completion, but didn't detail exactly how he would consider the objectives had been met at potentially the end of that 2 to 3 week timeline. So reassurances, definitely an opportunity to claim victory in this military campaign. But really, I think there's a great deal of clarity that was simply lacking from this speech, and clarity that many Americans who are against this conflict, and clarity that allies in the region have been looking for, perhaps something that Donald Trump could have given them, and he didn't during this speech.
All right. So Nick, as you mentioned, Mr. Trump making the case there, but he's been speaking to a country where a majority opposed this from the very beginning, with gas prices climbing. Can this speech really shift public opinion?
Probably not a great deal. I mean, he did speak for a brief moment, on the rising gas prices. The fact that gas prices have gone up about 30% for motorists in the course of this 5-week conflict. He spoke about them, saying that he knew Americans were, in his words, concerned about rising petrol prices. But he did say that these would be short-term increases. And he also said that they had increased entirely as a result of Iranian attacks against oil tankers within the region, very much laying the blame at Iran's feet and not taking the blame himself for starting this conflict with Iran. I think trying to win over public opinion will be very hard, because we've seen his popularity decrease as this conflict has gone on. About 2/3 of Americans now say they just want a swift withdrawal from this campaign. They just want it ended, even if all the objectives have not been achieved. Only about 28% of Americans explicitly support this military action. And really, those numbers have been dropping the longer this has been going on. So perhaps this was a chance for the US president to explain to Americans why this action was needed. And Donald Trump certainly went through the list there. But perhaps there wasn't quite enough reassurance for those skeptical Americans who are looking at this conflict and wondering whether it was all worth it.
All right, Nick, appreciate the instant analysis. Nick Harper with the latest for CNA from Washington, D.C.